Hi, I'm Leah Millsap. I'm one of the study coordinators here in the neurology department at the U, specifically in the headache division, and I work directly with Dr. Melissa Cortez.
Hi, my name is Heidi. I'm also a clinical research coordinator here at the University of Utah Neurology Department. In the headache division, I work with Dr. Kathleen Degree.
I'm Dr. Dan Henry. I'm in private practice, Foothill Family Clinic, and do a lot of clinical trials over the last 30 years.
My name is Whitney John. I work alongside Dr. Henry. We do clinical trials, and I'm a study coordinator and the site manager.
Chris Michelson. I work as well with Dr. Henry's team. We have a company called J. Lewis Research, and we conduct multiple clinical trials, but we work closely with Dr. Henry in doing migraine trials since 2002. And he probably did stuff before then, but that's as long as I've been around. So.
Okay. Chris, we'll let you take it from here, an introduction to clinical trials.
So we're going to look at a few slides tonight, just looking at the process of clinical drug development. And so the slides are kind of in depth, but we'll breeze through them. So it's just a brief overview, and you get an idea of where the medicines that we take are coming from and how they're approved. So step one is discovery and development. So most drugs, or all drugs, start here, and so they start looking at how compounds work, or how the body's working, and how the drugs might affect that, or they also may see an unanticipated effect from a other drug and start developing it from there. Part of the development process is determining how drugs are absorbed, distributed, metabolized, best dosages, mechanisms of action. Sometimes this is just artificial intelligence, and it moves into preclinical research then. And that, can be done either in vitro, kind of in nature, or in a test tube. So they'll get through preclinical, and preclinical can also, be some animal testing. So that the FDA requires researchers to use good laboratory practices, good clinical practice, et cetera. And so that kind of leads us into how is the patient protected? And so, the FDA closely regulates this business through, reviewing study conduct, the personnel, the facilities, the equipment, protocols, procedures, study reports. It's very in-depth and a very regulated business and industry nowadays, and rightfully so from the historical perspective of some things that went, a little bit sideways in the past. Step three, you get into the clinical research, and this is where the humans, the human participants, come in. And as you can see, it's trials that are done in people. As the developers design the clinical study, they will consider, what they want to accomplish for each different clinical research phase, and we'll move into that. There's, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and some little steps in between there with, 1A, 2B, stuff like that. So. In designing clinical trials, they look to answer specific questions related to the medical product. They follow a specific study plan called a protocol. Most protocols nowadays, typically are around 100 pages long. So it really develops the science behind the compound. It goes into how they anticipate researching and who they're going to let into the study and what's going to happen to them in the study. So before it begins, the review of the information is done by the drug company, but also the FDA. So the FDA can say, hey, we want some more material on this or that, or you can't do that. So it's again highly regulated, and as I kind of indicated before, it's you can look at the bullet points, who qualifies. Most the selection criteria are called inclusion and exclusion criteria, and that typically nowadays is about 40 different criteria probably on who can get into the study and what kind of health they can be in when they start a study. The protocol is also going to tell you how many people are going to be part of the study, and we'll see that in a couple of slides here about how many people are in each phase of each study. The protocol is also going to be determining how long the study lasts. Is there going to be a control group, how the drug will be given to patients, and what dosage, what assessments, and how the data will be reviewed. And so I think migraine studies are still interesting, very interesting, because their control group is typically placebo still nowadays. And so it seems cruel, but it is pretty impressive on the placebo effect even. Here's where we're going to look at the different phases briefly. So phase 1, typically very small, 20 to 100 people, participants. Then they can be short or several months long. Sometimes they're inpatient. Some are outpatient but closely monitored while the medicine is being introduced to the human. And so you can see on the bottom too, another thing that we'll look at tonight is how many of these drugs really make it to market. There's a tremendous amount of research and development done, and the ones that progress are very small. So we're looking at about 70% of drugs moving out of phase 1 to phase 2. So phase 2, it's a little bit bigger study, several hundred people with the disease or the condition. And I should have mentioned, phase 1 is typically, or it is, healthy adults or healthy individuals that don't necessarily have the disease or condition. So once again, you're going to knock off a bunch of more of these medicines, so it goes down to about 33% moving out of this phase. Phase 3, you're getting close to approval, so it's much larger studies to get the general results, from a broad population of people, and they can have a lot of other conditions that they can enroll in the study with. So as the phases go on, the criteria to get into the study loosen a little bit, but they're still pretty extensive. And you can see maybe about 25 to 30% of drugs move into this phase. So once you get through phase 3, you can apply for the new drug application or an NDA through the FDA. And once your drug's approved, there's potentially some phase 4 testing as well that gives you post-marketing information. And just a side note on going through this research and development and new drug application and approval, the common average nowadays is around 10 years and maybe $1 billion or $2 billion to produce medication. So you can see, drug companies are spending a tremendous amount of money to try and help people, but they also don't reap all the benefits, as maybe 70% of their drugs don't quite get to market. Let's see, this is kind of a little bit too much information, but you have to apply for a new drug application through the FDA. So it kind of shows you what steps you need to go through to get there: animal studies, manufacturing information, clinical protocols, data from human research, information about the investigator. So everybody's highly scrutinized, and this is how we keep people safe and bring quality medicines to market. Go ahead, Dr. Henry.
Would one of you like to comment on why patients would want to do a study?
Sure.
Whitney?
Well, not only does it give them the opportunity to help other people and help this drug progress, but it can help them get medication that they wouldn't normally be able to
Have access
to.
Yep. So pre-approval, some of these medicines we obviously see in the phase 1, maybe more in the phase 2 studies, that they're actually very helpful to people, and so we're able to offer some of these treatments early on and give people access to these medications and healthcare, at no cost.
And they're followed.
One thing you may want to, a good example of that would be the monoclonal antibodies to CGRP, in that a lot of our patients had access to these drugs, got huge benefit up to 5 years before the first approvals were in May. So that's a huge impetus, especially for patients who have severe disease and have tried all the standard treatments.
And they're closely followed by a doctor like Dr. Henry and get very good care.
So we'll keep moving through these slides rather quickly. So we're going to try to keep this down to about 5 more minutes. But this one's just saying, step 4: if a drug developer has evidence from its early tests and preclinical and clinical research, the drug is safe and effective for intended use, so they can file for this application to market the drug. So the FDA has to, again, thoroughly review all the studies. So there's multiple sites across the U.S. that are doing these sites with, as you've seen in phase 3 study, thousands of patients. And so, there's thousands and thousands of pages of information to process and do a statistical analysis on and approve the drug. So once again, they're thoroughly examining the submitted data and making a very scrutinized and educated decision on whether or not to move these drugs forward and let the general public access them. This is, again, just a brief slide on the new drug application, and I think it's the best way to put it. It tells the full story of the drug, all of its maybe side effects, adverse reactions, etc., and sometimes other unintended but beneficial side effects as well. They don't always have to be bad. They go through and the studies also create the proposed labeling, potential abuse information. As drugs get used in the public, there's also the mandate for safety updates, and that gets added to the package insert as well. Let's see. So just kind of an idea of how long the FDA can take too, so the process is long. Like I said earlier, it's 10 to 12 years, for drugs. Some are fast tracked into, maybe a 3 to 5 year period, but, even once all the information's in, the FDA still has 6 to 10 months to review. And, that can be delayed sometimes by these partial government shutdowns as well. Let's see. So once it's approved, it's determined to be safe and effective for its intended use and necessary. Let's see. They call it labeling. So we'll move past that. Again, once it's approved, there's going to be some potential FDA post-market drug safety monitoring. Again, it gets updated all the time with IND safety reports and investigational new drug safety reports. So those are collected throughout the life of the study and post-marketing. This is, you're not going to be able to see this, but it was just a slide to show just in general how long Dr. Henry's been working on these and how many studies he's been going through. So many drugs have been approved, and you can see the progression through some of the triptans to some of the new class of the ditans and the talcadipant studies, as well as the biologics with the calcitonin gene-related peptides. So very thorough history of migraine drug research and production, and so we've seen tremendous benefits over time, and I think Dr. Henry's probably seen the most response from maybe the calcitonin gene-related peptide antagonist as a drug that's really promising and has been approved by a couple of companies in the last year to not only reduce but sometimes eliminate migraines. Not to give false hope, but there's the true vision of reducing people's migraines and getting rid of this burden. It's very, I don't know what the right word is, but it's
well, the disability. I think that's why we're all passionate here, because we're looking at a disease process that is literally the 6th leading cause of disability in the United States, and we're talking about close to 40 million Americans having migraine disease. We're talking about at least 5 million who have chronic migraine. which is 15 to 30 days a month, and at least 2/3 of these individuals with chronic, if they don't have new treatments, 2/3 of them are unable to work. Their quality of life issues are huge. If they're children or adolescents, which is my strongest passion, I guess, is in the very young. They can't go to school, they're in home and hospital, and on 504 plans. So this is a very exciting time in migraine work in that we finally have new classes of medications coming out that are actually developed for preventing migraine disease rather than they were developed for high blood pressure, depression, or seizures, and they happen to help with migraines. So these are much more specific, far fewer side effects. So very exciting to be at this time. And I'll turn it over to our university colleagues.
We're just going to quickly switch over the slides. Thank you. Okay, great. So a little bit different than the medications and the medication trials and the clinical trials that they were just discussing. A lot of what we're doing here at the university are more observational trials. So this is really kind of in more of the diagnosis and understanding of the disorders themselves and the disease processes rather than like looking at the actual treatments and informing those treatment options. So I work with Dr. Melissa Cortez, and she's an autonomic physiologist here at the U. Looking at chronic migraine disorders as well as that autonomic dysfunction. Your autonomic nervous system is anything that you don't have control over. So a lot of that is your heart rate, your blood pressure, your pupils, things like that that are just kind of innate responses in your body. And we've been able to determine there's a lot of dysfunction within this nervous system when you have chronic migraine disorders. And so we're kind of wanting to be able to further characterize and assess what that dysfunction really looks like and be able to kind of help inform treatment options in the future as far as improving this autonomic dysfunction. So for us, kind of like what I just said, we're looking at a variety of symptoms and physiologic tests in these patients with headache disorders and headache-related disorders. So in that instance, some of the time we're looking at just autonomic dysfunction disorders as well, and chronic headaches and chronic migraines are a common symptom of that as well. And so to do this, we're hoping to be able to further inform diagnosis and treatment options. For our studies, we have a pretty broad inclusion criteria because it's an observational study, which is different than those clinical trials. Anybody that's aged 12 to 65 who has a history of headaches is eligible to participate in our study. And we don't discount for medications or any kind of treatment that you're currently receiving. We just like to be able to make a note of it. So things that we're specifically recruiting for at this time are people that have recent concussions and have consistent headaches. So your concussion could have happened a year ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago, but a lot of people that have these consistent headaches and have really kind of developed kind of a chronic migraine disorder after concussion is something that we're really interested in and kind of being able to further characterize and diagnose. Obviously, people that have chronic migraines, people that have orthostatic intolerance a lot of times also have chronic headaches, and that's another kind of autonomic dysfunction that we're really interested in looking at. And then the last one is we're specifically looking at the efficacy of Botox treatment in chronic migraines. So for this one specifically, we want to be able to get you before you start your Botox treatment, and so if you're considering that as an option for your chronic migraines or for your headache disorder, let us know, and hopefully we can get you in before that so we can really be able to determine whether this is something that can help you and kind of be able to inform whether Botox is something that could help. When you have a chronic migraine, is Botox something that we can automatically assume will work for you versus just kind of throwing a dart at the board? So for our studies, it's observational. It's typically a 2 to 3 hour study visit, and we also ask our participants to fill out an online questionnaire prior to the study visit. That online questionnaire is really assessing a lot of what Dan Henry mentioned as far as those kind of the disability, how your headaches really affect your day-to-day life, what your headache history really is, how many headaches do you have a month, your previous concussion history, the medications that you're taking. We really just want to be able to get the fullest picture of your disease and how your disease is affecting you, so that when we're looking at your test results, we have an informed answer and an informed interpretation of how to interpret those labs. Then after the online questionnaire, we ask you to come in for that study visit. And the main things that we're looking at are your heart rate, your blood pressure, your pupil response, and how they change with different body positions, as well as some cognitive balance concentration testing and sensation testing. And these are kind of unique as far as chronic migraine disorders go, because we're really looking at kind of that automated autonomic nervous system, which I think is pretty unique in headache disorders, and being able to kind of classify how that dysfunction changes with these people with chronic migraines. Other things to note for us is that we do offer compensation. It's a small amount. It's $10 for your time, $10 an hour for your time, and it comes as a check in the mail from the U. Everything that we do is completely voluntary, so if you are interested and willing to participate, and you come in and you start doing the testing, if you're like, I really just don't feel comfortable doing something that's looking at light sensitivity because I really know that's going to exacerbate my migraines, that's totally okay. And we can kind of skip that and we can make it work for you. So it's less restrictive, which is nice. An important thing to note, I think, for a lot of people is that we are unable to provide the results of our test to the participants, given that it's on a research basis and not on a clinical basis. We just can't give people those results and have clinical care be informed based on those results. And obviously everything we do is non-invasive. It's just kind of observational, looking at how your heart and your blood pressure and things like that respond. And you don't need to change your medical care, don't need to change your medications, change your routine. The worst that it could do is maybe give you a slight headache after the thing, but we really are quick to look at how you respond before and after the study visit. So hopefully we can mitigate those risks. And obviously, if you're interested, feel free to contact me. Now I'm going to turn it over to Heidi.
All right. Thank you, Leah, for introducing your studies with Dr. Cortez, and thank you, Dr. Henry's clinical team, for introducing your studies and going over the clinical trial process. I just want to echo everything that Dr. Henry was saying about how it's quite an exciting time to be a migraine patient, although of course it's unfortunate to carry the disease, but at the same time, so many treatments are out there currently, and our goal really is to try to make sure that patients are getting the best treatments that they possibly can to target their condition. So that being said, I'm going to go a little bit into the ongoing clinical trials and registry taking place here in our headache division here at the University of Utah. The two studies that are going on currently that we're actively enrolling for, the first is one clinical trial and one registry. The clinical trial is called MOTS, which stands for Medication Overuse Treatment Strategy, and the registry is called the American Registry for Migraine Research, or ARMR for short. To sort of organize my presentation, I'm going to go specifically into MOTS first to talk a little bit about the clinical research that we're doing here at the university. So the MOTS trial, as I mentioned, it stands for Medication Overuse Treatment Strategy, and what we're looking to characterize is specifically patients who have medication overuse headache. So what is medication overuse headache? So it's a condition that has a prevalence of about 1 to 2% worldwide, and it's not only a major public health problem, but it's also a big unsolved mystery in the field of headache research. Mainly because the best methods for its treatment are not clear. So here in the blue box, you can see the diagnostic criteria for medication overuse headache. And patients who have medication overuse headache typically experience headache greater than 15 days per month and are regularly overusing medications such as triptans, ergotamines, and simple analgesics to rescue or abort their headaches on greater than 10 to 15 days per month. So that criteria, again, it varies depending on the specific drug you're taking. So for example, if you're taking ibuprofens, Tylenols, Advils, more than 15 days per month for over 3 months, then you would be considered medication overuse. If you're taking triptans or glutamines, other combination analgesics like Excedrin, Fioricet, you would be considered, on greater than 10 days per month for over 3 months, you would be considered medication overuse. So there's a little bit of specificity in the diagnosing criteria, but just keep that in mind as we move forward. And the third criteria is if you experience worse headaches as a result of overusing these medications. So why is it important to understand what medication overuse headache is? Unfortunately, even though for some patients where medications to abort headaches have been really useful, oftentimes it's difficult for patients to see the long-term physiological effects of overusing their medications. Here it says that overuse of acute medications can produce long-lasting changes in the nervous system that increase vulnerability to frequent and repeated headache. So things like rebound headaches are something that most of our patients or migraine patients experience when they overuse their medications. And also, overusing medications can cause a lot of toxic side effects to other organs in our body, including our liver and our kidney. So things like that are hard to see in the long term, but it's important to recognize that these physiological changes are taking place in our patients, even when they might not feel like it, and all they want to care about is getting rid of their migraines or headaches. Right, so with the MOTS trial, as I mentioned, we're trying to really solve this mystery of medication overuse, right? The two main treatment approaches that currently exist for patients with medication overuse are 1, acute withdrawal, and 2, no withdrawal. So acute withdrawal specifically refers to requesting patients to immediately discontinue their overuse medication. So if you're using your Excedrins, you can't live without it. If you do acute withdrawal, you'd be asked to immediately discontinue them, stop cold turkey. And I would say that a lot of patients are intimidated by the fact that their medications have to be stopped immediately. But at the same time, we want patients to understand that we're not trying to leave them empty-handed, right? The goal is to also see if starting a new preventative therapy or adjusting a previously used preventative therapy is also beneficial for ameliorating the effects of medication overuse. And so not only that, but we also provide patients who are randomized to the acute withdrawal team an option to use a rescue medication that's in a different class than their overuse medications up to 2 times per week during their participation in the trial. So again, it's not really we're not trying to scare you and ignore your well-being throughout the trial. We really want to provide you with alternative options that will help you withdraw from your overusage. So the other treatment strategy that is commonly used is no withdrawal, which essentially means that you will not be asked to immediately discontinue your overused medications, but you will also begin a new preventative and see if that is able to support or improve your migraine outcomes. And in terms of eligibility criteria, you need to be at least 21 years old to participate in the trial. You do need to have a diagnosis of chronic migraine, and you cannot have episodic tension type headache for greater than 3 days per month prior to enrolling to in the trial. So that's a key diagnostic criteria, is that we do, although the general term is called medication overuse headache, we are specifically looking for chronic migraine patients for this specific trial. And of course, you have to be willing to be randomized to either of the 2 treatment groups, acute withdrawal or no withdrawal. You have to be willing to maintain a headache diary. You have to have follow-up care with our enrolling clinicians. So we do only enroll patients who are currently seeing providers here at the headache clinic at the University of Utah. So it just makes for easier coordination of the trial. But if you are interested, please do reach out and we can find a way to see if you'd be eligible to participate. And another key inclusion criteria is that you must not have had any changes to your migraine preventative therapy 4 weeks prior to enrolling in the trial. Right. So the MOTS trial, as Leah mentioned, is relatively observational. We're not trying to investigate a new drug for migraine patients. We're not doing any new extreme interventions. The trial is really just trying to see which of the two treatment strategies I previously described is more effective. So the only things you'd be really asked to do are 2 study visits. The first is the baseline and randomization visit, where it would take place on the day of your enrollment and the day you get prescribed a new preventative. And this visit would also tell you which group you're randomized to. The second visit would happen 12 weeks after your first visit, and you would be answering the same questionnaires, and we'd be assessing the relatively same outcomes at that visit as well. And then another key component of our trial is the daily headache diary. The diary is a key component to headache researchers in terms of reducing memory bias, because oftentimes patients, the main way of assessing, I would say, headache migraine outcomes is through patient-reported data. So without accurate patient-reported data, it's often not adequate to assess or evaluate patients' well-being accurately. So the key component to participating in MOTS would be your willingness to write a diary or electronically input a diary for at least 5 months throughout the year. And again, it's just a way that we need patients to commit and feel like they are inputting accurate data daily into our trial. And if we think about the benefits of participating, Dr. Henry and his team mentioned it a little bit earlier about sort of the benefits of participating in a drug trial. But I think even though this isn't a drug trial, there are still lots of benefits to participating. Of course, the immediate benefits are study compensation. You get up to $310 for participating in the trial. But if you, next, thank you. I would say that participating in this trial is also a way for patients to feel like their information, their medical history is being accounted for in the story of headache research, right? Your information specifically is contributing to researchers' goals to find medications and better treatment strategies for patients. And what that means is you're preventing future patients from undergoing unnecessary trial and error and suffering from unsuccessful treatments. So that really is the goal of recruitment and these trials, is we're trying to find the best treatment strategy and avoid mistakes for patients in the future. All right, so that was MOTS, that was the medication overuse trial. I'm gonna go a little bit into the registry that we have here now. It's called ARMOR, American Registry for Migraine Research. Thank you. Yep, and so ARMOR is a nationwide registry. It's sponsored by the American Migraine Foundation, and we at the University of Utah are one of 8 enrolling sites currently around the country. And in the words of the American Migraine Foundation, I'd just like to highlight the mission statement. Our mission is to mobilize a community for patient support and advocacy, as well as drive and support impactful research that translates into advances for patients with migraine and other disabling diseases that cause severe head pain. And so that was the mission statement of AMF, but the ARMOR registry has specifically 4 goals that are defined along 4 dimensions. The first is knowledge, right? So the goal of creating this registry, which is this online collection of patient data, is really to build a foundation of knowledge for headache researchers to tap into eventually and find answers to their research questions, all types, right? So oftentimes we hear about clinical trials where patients are excluded or included based on 40 bullet points of criteria, right? But when it comes to the registry, our goal is really to collect all patients' data. So if you have head pain of primary or secondary headache disorder, meaning if you have headaches as your main primary diagnosis or condition, or you have headaches as a result of traumatic brain injury or concussion or any other type of disease, you are eligible to participate. Your information, your story is relevant to our research. The second dimension that the goals of ARMOR reflect are treatment, right? So we're really trying to use that information and help researchers design better treatments for patients who don't necessarily respond well to the already existing treatments, right? So the goal is really to encompass every headache patient that's out there. And then the third and fourth are healthcare impact and research, right? So some patients, for example, have trouble accessing certain therapies because their insurances don't allow it. Well, the goal of ARMOR is to see whether we can get patients, insurance companies to approve multiple therapies at once without having to go through a lot of the, as I mentioned, trial and error that is unnecessary for patients' well-being. And then, of course, research. This is a research project that is intending to help researchers find better ways to design studies and better ways to read information. So the goal really is to have this foundation of knowledge again. And of course, every registry, I would say, is it's a team effort. It's not a one-sided effort, I would say. Both the patient, the clinical team, and the researchers and the data technicians have to play a part in contributing to interpreting this data and contributing to this data. In terms of patients, I would say, yep, so there's 3 things the patients would be asked to do to contribute to this registry. The first is questionnaires. Again, these questionnaires are all online, and they are launched every 3 months. They ask you things like your headache history, your current treatments, to things like your sleep quality and your pain tolerance, really trying to get a 360 overview of your lifestyle as a result of your headaches. And then what's going to complement that is the daily headache diary, which, as I mentioned, for the MOTS trial is a key research tool for headache in the field of headache. This daily headache diary is a great tracker if you're not already keeping track of your headaches and can be done both on your computer or your smartphone. And the third component is an optional component. You don't have to do it to be a part of the registry, but it's a blood sample collection where we would collect your blood sample and we would do genetic sequencing on it to see if perhaps there are genes related to migraine types or headache types, and also to see if there are genes that will help us predict whether patients can respond better to certain treatments or not. So in the words of the AMF, I would say it's this thing called precision medicine, where we're really trying to target the patient's specific condition and understand their biological framework that is contributing to that condition without neglecting any of those factors. And then on the clinical side, we as a research team also have to provide that information such as your diagnosis. We go by the ICHD3 beta diagnostic criteria. And we also upload things like your neuroimaging data, so MRIs, brain scans, any CT scans or anything that is an image of your head, basically, goes into this database, as well as your electronic medical record profile that has any relevant information to your headaches or migraines. And so here is some more details about the questionnaires. As I mentioned, they ask you a very comprehensive set of information. The first initial set of questionnaires is going to take around 1 to 2 hours. It's quite lengthy, but patients do have about 90 days to complete them, and they're all online and can be done on the patient's own at their own pace and at their own time. And then the follow-up questionnaires that are launched every 3 months after the baseline visit would take much less time and are more specific questions, and patients have up to 30 days to do them, to complete them after they hit the start button. And as I mentioned, the daily headache diary is also a key data resource for us. It's going to ask you 4 things: headache symptoms and triggers, duration of the headache, severity of the headache, and any treatments or medications taken. And here's sort of the computer interface that patients will see if they log into the daily headache diary. As I mentioned, it can be done on your smartphone as well. It's easily accessible in the App Store or the Google Play Store if you have an Android phone. And it's called ARMOR Headache Diary. And this is what the diary looks like on a smartphone interface. I think it's a great tool, as I mentioned. It tracks your headaches over the course of time, and you can see in a calendar view a color-coded version of sort of your month, like how severe your headaches were over the course of that month. And you can take this to your provider and say, oh, on this day I had, more severe headaches, or on this week I had some event and maybe that was what triggered my more severe migraine. So that's kind of a key useful tool for patients. And here is the second page of the diary entries. It'll ask you things like your pain levels, and also your overall functionality, and then any triggers that you thought might have contributed to your migraines. And also for our female patients, they will be able to enter menstruation information, which is something we take into account in our analysis, as well as any treatments or medications taken to abort headaches. And the third component, as I mentioned, is optional. It's a blood sample collection. Patients don't have to donate their blood, but if they do, again, we are trying to do genetic sequencing and see if there are genes related to or correlated to different conditions. And so the biosample collection will be taking place here at our clinic, at the headache clinic here at Imaging and Neurosciences Center. Patients we can draw the blood at any time, so it's all completely based on the patient's availability and schedule. And it's usually is done during the clinic appointments, and it takes about 2 minutes. Right. And as I mentioned, there will be integration of neuroimaging and electronic medical record information. This is sort of like a schematic to describe how we're using that information. Again, the goal is to take all of the neuroimages, of course, de-identified, from every single site that's enrolling for ARMOR, integrate that, and see if we can make discoveries related to patients' brain morphology in migraines and other headache disorders. Again, we're trying to capture data from all over and from all types of headache. So, awesome. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact the principal investigator, which is Dr. Kathleen Degree, or me, Heidi. My telephone number is listed here, and my email is also listed below. So, thank you. Okay. Thank you. Good job.
Okay, it's Chris and Whitney again from Foothill Family Clinic with J. Lewis Research. We just wanted to let you know how you can get involved with some of the studies that we have going on. You can give us a call directly at 801-554-0158. You can look us up online, jlewisresearch.com. You can email us. You can Google research near me. There's centerwatch.com, clinicaltrials.gov. Currently, we are enrolling for a variety of studies, including the new GPANTs, which are the oral CGRP medication. We're looking for people 18 and older for that. We also have the nasal spray, which is the triptan for little ones, 6 to 11. That's something that's been approved for a long time, but they're just trying to get it indicated for these younger ones. We also have a lot of those other CGRPs that are subcutaneous route or IV. So if you're interested, we'd love to just talk to you and see if you qualify. We can go over what each study would be like for you, but typically you would sign a consent form, ask questions, make sure it's the right decision for your treatment. You'd come in, we'd go over your medical history and obviously those bullet points of inclusion, exclusion. We end up doing your vital signs, sometimes an EKG, typically includes a blood draw. And then if it is an oral medication, we would dispense that medication for you to take home, and you would just follow up with us. Through our studies, you also do an e-diary, similar to the ones that they talked about. And then these studies will last sometimes 6 months to a year, and you just continue to follow up, and we do give you compensation. It's usually somewhere between $50 to $100 per visit, and there is additional compensation for doing that e-diary. So let us know if you're interested.
Also involved in all of that, of course, is you see one of our doctors or myself every visit. You get throughout the study, you start with a complete physical as well, with emphasis on the neurological system, and follow-up visits throughout with follow-up exams.
I'm not too sure if we have anything more to cover tonight, but
No, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone.